Thank you for the introduction, Paul. And thank you everyone for coming out tonight, braving the rain. I'm very pleased to be here to be able to talk to you about Greenvale's two projects. The first, the development project, the Alpha Torbanite deposit, and secondly, the Greenfields exploration project in the Georgina Basin. Just a bit about Greenvale. 397 million shares on issue with a market cap of 135 million. We've got 8.75 million in the bank. And the top 20 shareholders hold 48% of the company. The top 3 shareholders as the directors hold 24%. So it's a pretty tightly held company. As Paul mentioned, our board has a proven track record in discovery and development of mineral deposits. So I'll talk first about Alpha. Alpha is located in central Queensland, about 500 kilometres west of Rockhampton. It's discovered in the late 1930s, and as such, it's got an 80-year history of exploration and test work. So 60 historical holes were drilled there. It's been test work on oil yields, test work for activated carbon potential, and test work on modified Fisher assay work as well. Now, Torbanite is not the kind of rock you hear a lot about, but it's an organic rich sedimentary rock. It's not a coal, it's not a oil shale, it's a rock in its own right. And what makes it special is its yield. So the yield at Alpha, the Torbanite produces up to 698 litres of hydrocarbons per tonne of Torbanite. It's exceptional. Now, CITA retort test work that Greenvale's undertaken has confirmed that the Torbanite produces up to 15% bitumen products, and this is in line with historical work. Now, I mentioned there was some drilling done there historically. We can't use that drilling to generate a maiden mineral resource estimate. So earlier in the year, a substantial drilling program was undertaken at Alpha, coring and chip sampling. All the holes have been geologically logged. There's been downhole bore logging and sampling with the with the samples at various stages of preparation and analysis with a group of labs around the country. So the vision with Alpha is to become Australia's only domestic source of bitumen products. But not only bitumen, Alpha has potential to produce a range of products, including blending fuels such as diesel, industrial carbon products, which is produced from the spent the spent Torbanite, the spent cannel coal, sulfuric acid as a byproduct of sulfur removal from those hydrocarbons, and wholesale electricity. Now, this is thanks to an updated commercialisation strategy that involves a hybrid gas-fired and solar power station. Now, the idea behind the hybrid power station is when you heat Torbanite, it produces a whole range of hydrocarbons. Two of the hydrocarbons that are produced are gases and volatiles. Now, these might otherwise be considered a waste product, but using those volatiles and gases that are produced from the Torbanite, running them to a gas turbine to generate electricity, and then the waste heat from the turbine can be used to power or heat the retort, which is essentially just an oven. So this is a real elegant solution to taking something that might be otherwise considered a waste product and using it to actually add value to the project. The other component of the hybrid power station is the solar farm, and this is expected to offset all carbon emissions associated with the life of the project. And this will align the project with Queensland's 50% renewable power target, which is set for 2030, and net zero emissions by 2050. Now, bitumen is one of the key products to come out of Alpha. Australia imports all of its bitumen, 100%. About 50% comes from Southeast Asia, 40% from China, and the remainder from the Middle East and the US. In fact, our neighbours New Zealand and Indonesia also import 100% of their bitumen. And so these present as potential export markets for an alpha product. Bitumen demand is on the rise, as you can see from the graph on the upper right of the slide. And this has been exacerbated by infrastructure spending that's been brought forward as a result of the pandemic by governments. More locally here in Queensland, we've got a successful 2032 bid for the Olympics. Infrastructure spending will be brought forward for that. And more recently, the federal government announced rural road upgrade funding. So there's a fair bit of pressure on the demand side. Now, our site of testing has confirmed historical work that indicates up to about 15% of the Torbanite will be refined into bitumen products. And we've been in touch with several local asphalt manufacturers, and they're very keen on offtake. So we're confident that we can secure long-term agreements for long-term supply agreements for the bitumen that's produced. Now, this is the conceptual processing plant layout, and it's relatively straightforward. The crushed Torbanite and cannel coal is heated in the retort, which is an oven just in the absence of air. Once retorted, there's spent Torbanite and spent cannel coal, which has potential as an industrial carbon product. So we're talking feed for cement kilns, PCI, potentially a metallurgical product, or potential for upgrading to activated carbon, which is another 100% imported product. And that's a value-added product that Alpha may be able to produce. And we look forward to doing some test work on the carbon side of things in the new year. Bitumen products come out as a result of the retorting process. And the remaining hydrocarbons pass through a hydrogen desulfurization process just to remove the sulfur. As I said earlier, the gas and the volatiles would be returned to a gas turbine to generate power and heat. And the remaining hydrocarbons would be distilled and refined for blending fuel use, such as diesel. Now, with the Basin mining industry right on the doorstep of Alpha, this presents as a potential opportunity to sell a Greenvale blending diesel into that kind of market. Now, when looking at a process plant like this, on an order of magnitude basis, it's about $120 to $200 million capital cost. Now, with a unique deposit comes a unique test work approach. And because Torbanite isn't a common sort of commodity, the labs aren't typically set up well to do a lot of the test work that we require. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that because the oil produced from the Torbanite is rich in long-chain hydrocarbons, it's thick and tarry, it can gum up their glassware. Some of the machines that are used to measure the amounts of different kinds of hydrocarbons in the splits actually just are unable to work. So Greenvale has spent the best part of 2021 developing its own retort. Now that's designed to separate, not only extract the oil from the Torbanite and the cannel coal, but also to split the oil into its different components. And that's where the products lie, because the bitumen component of the oil needs to be separated from other components that may be saleable as other products. Up the top there, we've got an image of some of the splits that were taken off the retort from the latest round of test work. Now, some commercial processes or analytical methods are suitable for the Torbanite, and one of them is called modified Fisher assay. What modified Fisher assay does is it extracts the total amount of oil out of the Torbanite or the cannel coal, and so you're left with a yield, which is a percentage of or litres per tonne. And I'm very pleased to be able to announce these. These went out to the market this morning. Last month, I would have told you that the Torbanite yields up to 650 litres per tonne, and that the cannel coal ranges between 90 and 200 litres per tonne. But based on these results, our results that were put out this morning, and the first results that we have collected for the Alpha project, we've produced up to 698 litres per tonne out of a Torbanite, and between 123 and 206 litres per tonne for the Cannel coal. So these are excellent results. And while Alpha is a unique deposit, if you're going to compare it to anything, you can compare it to some oil shales. There's some examples of Australian oil shales there, the Rundle, the Stewart, and Julia Creek. And you can see that those yields are much lower than those we're getting from both the Torbanite and the Cannel coal, and it's on the order of multiples. So what are our next steps? Well, we need to get all our lab results back, and they'll be fed into the maiden mineral resource estimate for Alpha. We need to finalise our Greenvale retort and systematic processing method. And that's important because we need to systematically test drill core samples taken from the deposit, and those results will feed back into the feasibility study for next year. So we'll be systematic retorting of drill core and producing some retorting of samples for marketing purposes. Outside of that, probably more on the approval side of things, we're looking at starting our wet season ecological surveys. That is also important. The EPBC referral that's required to go to the federal government is a 3-month lead time on that. So by us getting this work done now, we can submit those approvals, referrals, and that puts us in a good place to be able to look at other things like mining lease applications and environmental authority applications next year. All right, Georgina. So the Georgina Basin IOCG project is located in an area of the Northern Territory called East Tennant. Now, East Tennant has undergone what can be described as a modern day gold rush. So 3 years ago, there was only one exploration tenement in East Tennant. And as of November, there's 55,000 square kilometres of granted tenements and a whole range of other ones under application. Now, Greenvale's subsidiary, Knox, that holds the tenements for Georgina, it was an early mover, securing a decent land package in this highly prospective area. And in fact, one of the top 10 landholders in the Georgina region. So why the excitement? Well, over the last 4 years, between Geoscience Australia and the NT Geological Survey, $40 million has been invested in geoscience in this region. And that culminated in the National Drilling Initiative program that was finalised late last year. And the reason for that is in Tennant Creek, there's exposed rocks that host deposits. But as you move further east, those exposed rocks give way to the Georgina Basin. And the idea with all this work being sunk, money and this investigation sunk into this region was, are the basement rocks still prospective for IOCG deposits? And the results of the drilling program confirmed that. All 12 holes intersected alteration, 7 of them intersected the right kind of rocks, in fact, the same rocks that host deposits at Tennant Creek, and one of them actually intersected base metal mineralization. So this has gone a long way to de-risking exploration for companies like Greenvale, and it's given us some real encouragement about the prospectivity of the region. IOCG deposits are commercially attractive deposits. In South Australia, you would have heard of Olympic Dam, Prominent Hill, and Carrapateena. They're all IOCG deposits. In northwest Queensland, there's the Ernest Henry mine that's been operating since 1995, another IOCG deposit. But closer to Georgina, at Tennant Creek, the Tennant Creek deposits are renowned for their grade. So as an example, the Warrego deposit, it's 4.75 million tonnes, so it's not a big deposit, but 8.7 grams per tonne gold average grade and 2% copper. So 1.3 million ounces out of that deposit. And so that's what we're looking for here at Georgina. On the map there, you can see our granted tenements. They're in red, 7 granted tenements. The other ones in green remain in application, and we're looking at progressing those. So since I came on board in September, we've done a fair bit of work out at Georgina, and it's fair to say that's been the focus of my attention. We put out 50 kilometres of access tracks into the sand dunes. We established a site camp, drilled a production bore to supply water for the drill rig, for the diamond drill rig, and we've completed our first drill hole. It was very exciting. Just under 800 metres of drilling out of the first hole, and we've commenced drilling our second hole. On top of that, we've been doing some geophysical survey work and modelling, and that will identify further prospect areas for bringing into the drill testing pipeline. So a bit about Twin Peaks. This is our first target, and this is where we've drilled our first hole on the western of the two anomalies. It's identified in a magnetic survey. Follow-up gravity survey identified related gravity anomalies associated with the magnetics. And that's really prospective because the IO and IOCG deposits are iron oxides. They're dense, and iron oxides tend to be magnetic. Even in hematite-dominated deposits, there tends to be a bit of residual magnetite. So these really fit the bill for the IOCG model. So we designed 4 holes, just over 3,000 metres. We got up there, and this is what our first hole looks like. I've broadly coloured the rock types here. The brown on the drill trace is all the basement rocks. So all the rocks that potentially host IOCG mineralisation. And as you can see, it lines up pretty well with our magnetic anomaly. This is just some photos of the core, the rock types and the alteration. So we've got lots of hematite alteration in the top photo, hematite altered breccia in the second, and hematite chlorite altered metasedimentary rocks in the bottom. And that's really just the highlight. These are the same kind of rocks you get in Tennant Creek. It's the same kind of alteration. And that's just a graphical representation of the same. Rock types on the left dominated by metasediments and breccia, and alteration on the right. And again, that's dominated by hematite with some other minerals. We actually intersected some trace native copper in this first hole, which is very exciting. And we regard this as proof of concept as it indicates that there's some metals floating around in the system. Whether there's any other metals outside of this, we'll have to wait for the assays. Our core was delivered to the lab on Friday, and it's been cut and prepped as we speak. Moving to our central tenements, we've been conducting target generation work, and that's modelling the geophysical responses from surveys that were conducted earlier in the year. And we've generated 3 new targets to bring into the pipeline: Mawson, Banks, and Leichhardt. All 3 of these have coincident magnetic and gravity anomalies, so they're great IOCG targets. So next steps, well, we're going to complete our second hole. We'll demobilise the rig. And over the break for January and the rest of December, hopefully we'll get our first lot of gold assays back from the first hole, interpretation. And when we return, we'll do the 2 remaining holes at Twin Peaks. By the time those are finished, we want to be able to roll right onto the targets in the central tenements. So in December and January, we'll be looking to forward approvals through there and finish the site preparation so we can roll onto those smoothly. Outside of that, we're looking at some more target generation work. The areas in blue and the areas in dashed red, they are tenements that are yet to be granted. We're looking to do what we can to advance those. They require access agreements with the landholders. So in summary, the Alpha Torbanite project, ultimately the vision is to be Australia's sole producer of bitumen products. It's a unique, high-yielding deposit with potential for multiple marketable products, strategic, energy-efficient, and carbon offset commercialisation pathway with a mineral resource estimate we're pushing to get done by the end of this year, feasibility study by the end of the first quarter of next year. At Georgina, we've got a substantial tenement holding in what is a new IOCG frontier. We've cemented our first mover status by not only having an excellent tenement package, but getting on the ground and being one of the first explorers to actually get drilling. Our first hole's complete. We've got the right kind of rocks and the right kind of alteration. So it's very exciting. And we've got further prospects defined for introduction to the drill testing pipeline for the second quarter of next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Had two questions. One is you talk about the growing demand for bitumen. How fast can you bring that into production to capitalise on that opportunity?
Look, that's an excellent question. There's about 18 months to 2 years worth of approvals, and that's just on the approval side of things. First, we need to finish the mineral resource estimate and generate our feasibility study to demonstrate that the project is viable. So the answer to that is I'm thinking probably around about 2.5 years, something to that effect.
And the second question that we had, Matt, is how important, can you try to tell us how important that first hole at Georgina is in the scheme of things and when you expect to get some assays?
So as a geologist, we talk about footprints when you're targeting a hydrothermal deposit. And what a footprint is if a deposit's this big, your footprint might be this big. And so that's all that alteration that we're talking about, that the minerals change are in a halo around deposits. So whether or not we actually intersect a decent amount of gold mineralization in this hole, I think it's pretty clear we've intersected the footprint of a hydrothermal system. And that's how important this first hole is. It's provided proof of concept. We've got the right kind of alteration, we've got the right kind of rocks, and we've actually got trace copper minerals. So we're very excited. It's an excellent result so far. And to the second part, assays. Well, we hope to get gold assays before Christmas. As was mentioned earlier, labs have got a bit of a backlog, but I've been keeping the lab manager in the loop for about the last 6 weeks, every few days on our progress. So we're hoping that slot that is sitting there for us will allow us to have some results back before Christmas. Not Mount Isa, no.
Please thank Matt Healy. Thanks, Matt.